Some of the most beloved DMs on the planet have some powerful phrases that they use often that keep everyone around the table laughing and having a good time. And while you don't have to use these exact sayings in the same way, using some variation of them or just the idea behind them will make your games more memorable and keep your players coming back for more. So let's start with phrase number 1. Let's talk about, of course, Matthew Mercer, who uses this saying all the time: you can certainly try. You see, this is a very powerful phrase in D&D because it accomplishes 3 things. The first is, it reminds the players they can do literally anything in this game, or at least they can try to do anything. The only limit is your imagination. The second thing this saying accomplishes is that the undertone is that whatever the player tries, there probably will be consequences. So are you sure you want to do that? And the third thing it accomplishes, and this is where the true power of this saying lies in my opinion, but there's almost a level of goading to it. When the DM says you can certainly try, they're daring you to try. Go on, do it. It's a 3-pronged attack where, if used correctly, it will make a player try something crazy and out the box even though they know it could go badly. But you know everyone's going to have fun in the process. It's also just a great response for when someone says something just completely ridiculous that you know is not going to work. Okay, say the bard wants to seduce that dragon. The bard can certainly try. And if they do try and they get a nat 20, don't worry, a nat 20 does not necessarily mean an automatic success in what the player's intention was. It can simply mean the best possible outcome from that attempt. If the bard tries to seduce a dragon and gets a nat 20, he doesn't seduce the dragon. But the best possible outcome does happen. Maybe the dragon now likes the bard and gives the bard some gold. Or maybe the dragon just doesn't see the party as a threat anymore and doesn't burn them to a crisp. That's a success. So the next time a player asks if they can do something, whether the answer is a simple yes, a yes but, or a well that's impossible, say instead you can certainly try. So let's move on to our next DM phrase to keep players having fun, and take a look at Aabria Iyengar and her phrase, what you don't see is. Now this is an exceptional phrase because as DMs we want to often immerse our players so much that they literally only know what their characters would know. But the issue with this is a lot of build up and suspense that happens narratively the characters would never know about. If the story is about a shadowy creature following the players home at night, silently getting closer, following them from tree to tree until finally it sees an opening and it pounces, well, from the player's point of view, they spend that whole time just walking home. Adding details for the players to know that the characters don't can add so much tension and mystery and excitement to the game. So next time you roll and something almost happens to the characters but doesn't, or a story beat happens behind the scenes, maybe there's a consequence of a character's action that the characters would never know about, then say what you don't see is, then tell them what they don't see. And obviously, like everything else in D&D, and I'm going to say this a lot, this won't work for every table. If your table doesn't like role-playing that much, or doesn't like knowing things that their characters wouldn't know, or maybe they like metagaming a little too much, then extra information like this can often lead to negative consequences. But if your players like it, and are confident enough in their own ability to not let player knowledge affect character actions, then this phrase is definitely worth it. Which brings us on to our next saying, which is used by Brennan Mulligan. And different variations of these phrases are used by different DMs. I'm not saying any particular DM coined any of these phrases, but some DMs do use them very well. And Brennan's is, how does your player feel in this situation? Brennan asks this a lot to particular players when their characters are experiencing a place or a moment or an NPC or something that resonates with that character or their backstory. And it's so powerful because not only does it put the spotlight on the player in that moment, and maybe also allows the DM a little bit of time to look something up or move stuff around, but also because you can single out players who you know want to roleplay more but maybe don't have the opportunity to, or players who haven't had something to do for a while. You can pull them back in, and it makes the player really think about what their character's motivations are and what makes them tick, and can often lead to some real-time fleshing out of their characters, breathing not only more life into themselves but the world around them as well. And it's also just a lot of fun to see what players come out with when the attention is suddenly and unexpectedly thrust upon them. See, players, that's what it's like every time you ask me the name of that random NPC shopkeeper. It's Bobbit, by the way. They're all called Bobbit. Okay, please subscribe and let's move on to our next DM phrase. And I didn't want to use Matt Mercer twice here, but he often says one of the best goddamn lines in D&D history. And that is, of course, how do you want to do this? In my personal experience, this is the line that gets the biggest cheers at any table. You say it when a player's character takes away the last hit points of a big bad. Then the player explains in detail how their character kills the thing. Or, you know, knock them out, but let's face it, probably kill them. And once again, this is a multi-pronged saying, because not only is it a celebratory moment, signifying the end of a big battle and allowing a player to describe a mortal combat finisher, but for a brief moment gives the dungeon master reins to a player. They get to narrate, they get to describe the scene, and are also thinking about what their character would do, how they would act in this situation. What would they say? It's a fully immersive moment. Now, you might have players that aren't into it all that much, they don't want to take the spotlight in those moments, and even Matt Mercer occasionally takes the DM reins back and then describes the final blow in more detail, but it can always become a moment where your D&D story becomes not just a thing mostly controlled by a DM, but also by the players themselves. It's a collaboration. And in a similar vein to that, and this next phrase can be attributed to just every DM under the sun, everyone uses it, that's how powerful this is. But it's, what does it look like when you do this? And this pulls together a lot of elements we've already spoken about in this video. When a player casts a spell or does something that is visually ambiguous, you ask them what it looks like and they describe it to you. You'd be surprised at how many players there are out there who don't know what the colour of their own magic is, or don't even know what their arcane focus is. I mean, it's in their hands 90% of the time. What is it? And by asking your players what it looks like when they do things, once again puts them in the shoes of their characters, makes them think about who they are and what they look like, and it allows everyone else around the table to also visualise what's going on in that moment. It's great for all-round player development and immersion, and it can also just lead to players coming up with some really cool visualizations in the mind. Now, obviously, as with everything in D&D, these phrases may not work for everyone. And if they don't work for you, throw them out the window. But every phrase we've spoken about actually has the same goal in mind: to encourage or facilitate memorable moments. You can certainly try leads to players certainly trying. What you don't see is leads to, wait, I didn't see that moment? How does that make you feel? Leads to compelling character growth moments. And how do you want to do this? And what does it look like when you do this? Leads to you finding out exactly how your players do this, and it's always awesome. And as a DM, using these phrases or variations of them will do the same thing for you, create moments and memories for both you and your players alike. And there's actually something else that can create these moments that I also learned from all the DMs we spoke about in this video, and it's all about taking the spotlight off yourself. And I talk about it and many other tips in this video here, so watch that next.